Welcome to the Community Collective podcast. I'm Johnny B. Good, the flip-flop agent, and I've partnered with the Davison Area Chamber of Commerce to bring you the stories that shape our local communities. In our third season, our focus is about connecting, learning, and celebrating the voices that make our communities unique. Join us during this third season as we engage in thoughtful conversations and insightful moments. This podcast is commercial-free and supported by both myself, my co-host, and our guests. We would be so appreciative if you could like, share, and subscribe as we continue having conversations that matter and cannot thank you enough for taking the time to listen. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Community Collective podcast. The reason I know it's morning, even though it is not, is because I'm still drinking coffee. So it's going to be one caffeinated day for me today, but that's okay. I'm here and I'm excited to talk not only with our special guest, the superintendent for Davison Community Schools, Matt Loban, but before we get to Matt, I have to mention my co-host, Travis. Are you there, my friend?
I am. Well, good afternoon, Johnny. How are you?
I am doing great, man. Doing really well, staying busy these days. So I'm glad to be in my office getting some work done today.
Oh man, you know what? I got my hair cut to look presentable, especially on a podcast, and then grabbed my coffee, and I was ready to start the day.
I hear you. I hear you, man. Yeah. And so I'm still drinking coffee, even though it appears to be about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That's okay. I've got a lot of work to get done and I'll be working late into the evening today. But enough about you and I. Why don't we bring in Matt Loban over here and say, Matt, how are things going, my friend? Welcome to the Community Collective podcast.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's a wonderful afternoon.
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad that I can be here. So before we get into some more high level questions, I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe update the community on the things that are happening in and around the Davison Community Schools as it relates to the building updates there, not only at the high school, but across the district as it relates to the new build and the repair from the hailstorm that we sustained last summer.
Yeah. Why don't we start with the bond that the community generously has invested in? You know, last summer we continued the work on the Performing Arts Center at the high school. We've made tremendous strides in trying to get that closer to wrapping up. We anticipate that's going to be completed here at the end of spring, beginning of summer, and be able to open that up for the community and our students for the 24-25 school year. That Performing Arts Center will contain the box, which is the new auditorium and stage area for community events, for musicals, for plays and presentations and award ceremonies and all kinds of good stuff like that. But that area also includes the vocal music area for the choir and the instrumental music area for the band. They'll also have a new DTV studio and classroom lab. And then there's the old athletic meeting room down below will be our green space or green rooms and have the dressing rooms and storage for set design and costumes and all the mechanical rooms that go with that. We also had a couple updates. We opened up the west entrance at the high school for the new safety vestibule. And that was a tremendous relief for all of us. Instead of having to walk all the way around the building to get in on the north side, we can now re-enter through the west entrance. So that's been nice for events taking place at the high school and for all our students. So we opened that up there in the fall and completed that this summer. We had 2 secure vestibules. One at Seiple Elementary was built and one at Gates Elementary. That's part of our initiatives for improving the safety and security for our staff and students. And then we had some, just other upgrades that we've been doing through the bond and continue to do that. And I'll talk some more about the ones coming up this summer here in a second. Moving on to the hail damage that we, and as like many are still coming out of from July, we had all of our 39 outbuilding roofs were completed. That included things like sheds and barns and concession stands and such. So there was 39 of those. We had our main roofs at the middle school, at the high school, at Thompson Elementary, Hill, Cardinal Center over here where we are, including the Cardinal's Nest and then Cardinal Station. So all of those roofs were replaced. We've had a number of rooftop units, HVAC units have had to have work, and that was in conjunction with the roofs being attached to the roofs. They have to work simultaneously. The last board meeting, we just passed about a little over $500,000 in damage to the unit's vent and insulation. All that money is coming through an insurance claim, like most of us are having to do. We use an insurance company that's for schools named SetSeg. And so we've been blessed to be able to pay for those repairs out of our insurance claims so far and not have to dip into any general fund. We also are looking at next summer or this upcoming summer, the bond work. Like I said, we plan on wrapping up Performing Arts Center, but then we're going to move to the site improvements at the high school, which contain improvements to lighting, moving the parent loop to a more conducive space, and also to accommodate the volume of parent drivers that we have dropping students off. We're looking at more parking up on the north side, where typically during football games, people are parking on that grassy knoll, as we call it, creating more parking up there and a dedicated spot for buses to line up that would be out of the way of cars and traffic flow. Improving all of that asphalt and improving curbing and sidewalks and just all those kinds of issues that we've run into at the high school. And then we're also looking at secure vestibule additions at Thompson Elementary, at the Alt Ed, and it's slipping my mind. I just had a meeting about it yesterday. Hill Elementary. And so those are the secure vestibules we're doing there. And then the summer we'll begin to renovate what will soon be the old auditorium, band room, and choir room stage into what will now be the new community room and fitness area, wrestling room, and college lecture space.
It's amazing to see that you had such a calm start to your tenure with Davison Community Schools. Just calm as can be.
Yeah. No rest for the weary, right? So it was fine. I think going through the pandemic with Superintendent Brown and having to navigate that really helped prepare me for a lot of things that could come our way. So.
Well, and I know Johnny and I can speak as parents. I mean, we're thankful for what's going on in Davison Schools. I know my wife's a teacher in a different district. And so definitely know concerns and needs of educators and staff as well. And I feel like the school district's really doing a lot to make sure there's improvements with the support of residents and the bond, that the future is really bright in Davison Schools. The buildings are looking nice. They're becoming more secure. I mean, I know when I've gone to one of my kids' schools, the vestibules are definitely doing a good job with what they're doing working. But then with the security that's there as well. So it is, you guys are doing a great job. I know there's always questions of when's this going to be done? When's that going to be done? So, that's why we always appreciate updates from you, especially on what the community has invested in the future of our schools.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I thank you for that. That's very kind of you to say. And there's a lot to do. It's never going to be done fast enough, especially in my mind. I get an idea and I tend to want it done immediately. And maybe that's because I'm an only child, but there's a lot to do still. I mean, one of the comments that was made was we went out for the bond was that our buildings look tired. They're older, the high school's over 50 years old now, and they take their tolls. And so the community over 50 years has made a significant investment in all of these buildings, the structures, through one way, shape, or the other. They're investing in all forms that we go through to conduct business every day. And so it takes money and it takes time and energy to continue to sustain all those things, right? And to upgrade them as times change. So we're able now in a position because of the bond, because of the dollars that we are receiving through grants and such, and seeking those out to improve, like you said, Travis, the security upgrades, which many of those have been in personnel. So being able to say that we have armed security guards in all of our school buildings is huge. Identifying single point access to those buildings is huge. And adding those secure vestibules is just another layer. And those are just a few of those things that we're looking to do as we continue to make improvements and strengthen the safety and security of our staff and students, the investment the community has made.
Yeah. So I know we've all probably had a chance to bump into you at sporting events or youth sporting events with all of our kids, but I know probably a lot of our listeners are very interested to learn a lot more about you and kind of your history. So, as you've transitioned into the role of superintendent, what have been some of your immediate priorities for Davison Community Schools, especially in terms of student development and community engagement?
Yeah, so having grown up in the community, working here, going to college locally, and I've never really left. Davis community was, has and always will be, extremely important to me. Obviously, in that role, that's kind of important, and that's why I'm honored to be the superintendent of this district. I love Davison. I think extremely well of our community, probably too much. Some would say that I hold us higher in regards than most communities. I think there's something special about Davison. So when I had the opportunity to apply and the board graciously appointed me as superintendent, it was truly an honor to be able to have the impact on the students' lives here at Davison, like so many did in my life, is a it's a significant responsibility that I don't take lightly. We are grooming future community members. I think it's evident that many of our families grew up in Davison. They are from long lines of residents that have been here for generations. And so what we have here is special in that many ways people know each other. We know each other's stories, and there's a lot of positives in that. And that creates strong bonds and strong connections, which can serve as a lot of momentum for making positive change. And it can also serve as the case for sustaining the great things happening here. But at the same time, you have those relationships that provide for the opportunities to have honest conversation about things that need to change for the better.
Yeah, you know what? And I think you are a great example of kind of what I know my goal with the chamber's been too is you were raised here in Davidson, part of a wonderful family that's very involved, and you made that decision to say, this is where I want to be, this is where I want to raise my family. And your role is a great example of how you've grown up here, and now you're saying, hey, I'm here to give back. I'm here to show how much I love our community. And that's really what I'm hoping for with our team at the chamber is almost exactly like that. We want to create a community to where when our kids, especially I think of my kids, if they want to go away somewhere to college or, go away for a few years, I want them to have great memories here and think, okay, Davis is the place I want to go back and live, raise my family, and there's going to be jobs here for them. Whether it's in schools or someplace else in manufacturing or there's so much that offers in our area, and I think that's what's exciting about what you're doing at Davison Schools. You're bringing those family values and community values that you grew up with, and now you're implementing it in what your job is. And I don't know if you can say it's your job. I think because you enjoy it so much when I've talked to you, and I think that's important for people to realize that you're having fun with what you're doing because you have a passion and love for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, I'm honored every day and almost humbled to be able to sit at the table with other superintendents around the county and legislators and be that person to represent our community or be another person that represents our community. I don't take it lightly because I do feel our community is phenomenal. And there's a lot of good things happening there. Long history of success and just positive thing, and we want to perpetuate that, right? And like you said, the end goal should be that when our kids graduate, they look back and have fond memories. It would be ignorant to say that everybody can say that. I think that's obvious when you look at posts on social media, or you think back. I mean, not everything is positive, from interactions with other kids or just things that happen to us in life. There's highs and lows, but to try to create opportunities for kids to connect with each other, to find belonging in the schools, to see places where they fit and are part of a greater community. in the schools helps them understand what their future place is going to be in the greater global community, right? And so, like you're saying, with our my work with you in the chamber, or trying to not necessarily work, but us trying to foster those relationships is only going to serve to strengthen that. We want to start making these connections and bridges for kids, especially in the higher grades, as they transition from secondary school into that greater global community. We want them to have experiences now to see what's out there. And that includes place-based learning opportunities, just seeing what's out there in ways they can not only work, but they can also serve. And we have a ton of agencies and institutions that serve our community, like Outreach East and Kiwanis and Optimists and the churches. And there's just so many ways for students to connect with their community, and then the community to grow with those kids. And when that's happening, when we're all doing it together, you create safer communities, you create more positive communities, and more trusting communities. And that's part of what I see as being important for me to help develop in my years, however many years I have, to be able to serve in this capacity.
Yeah, and so no, I know we've kind of touched a little bit about your history and your background, but I think one thing that I think I would like to know more about is that, I mean, you have a rich background in education. You started teaching, I believe, math, and then moved into the assistant principal role at one of the schools, and then assistant superintendent. How has your journey shaped your educational philosophy, particularly in regards to student and community impact?
Yeah. So when I graduated from high school in Davison in 98, I went to U of M Flint. And I was studying to be an engineer. And at the end of my freshman year, I was asked to be what they refer to as a supplemental instructor for a calculus class. And basically, it was like I held recitations at night for students that needed extra help, almost like study skills. And that process really started to spark an interest for me. I guess it took me back to an interest I had long had for being an educator. I also had started coaching seventh grade baseball that year. Tim Rye was my varsity coach, and he had asked me to do that. And so I fell in love with that aspect. When I graduated from college at U of M Flint, I took my first teaching job at Lapeer East High School. I taught there for a year, and then I had the opportunity to come back to Davison when they had a position open up, and applied for that. And I started teaching at the high school in secondary math. And then in 2012, I became the K-12 math and science curriculum coordinator. That was critical. That role in itself was critical for a couple of reasons. One, having been secondary, it's a completely different world teaching secondary students than it is teaching elementary. I had the opportunity to work with a lot of elementary student or teachers to better understand their world and how to teach students to learn. At that age, students are learning how to learn. So that was a whole nother piece of education I had never had any experience with. As you go into secondary, we're still learning how to learn, but it's really about the content, right? The content grows in scope and magnitude. That gave me a new perspective. We talk about in education, you have these different stratospheres of scope of influence as well as perspective. In the classroom, we tend to look at our 28 to 35 students, and those are our kids. That's our world. As you move to building roles, it gets bigger, and in district roles, it's even bigger. Going through as a curriculum coordinator, I grew in leadership in terms of helping to guide and support and serve 300 teachers, really leading professional developments, getting up in front of staff, your colleagues, which is some of the most difficult things to do. And then it also broadened me away from just Davison, but at the county level. I started working with our ISD math coordinator, Linda Funch, and I was doing presentations with her and James Emmerling from science at that county level. So that broadened my perspective and my network in seeing education as a greater role than just that classroom. 5 years of that led me to assistant principal, which, I mean, then you start moving into the policies and procedures and navigating a lot of board policies and implementing administrative guidelines, and that administrative role, which many attribute to be in the dark side, right? And so I entered into that for a year and a half, and then was honored to be selected by Superintendent Brown at that time, or incoming superintendent at that time, to be his assistant. And Mr. Brown and I had worked so closely when I was in the curriculum role, and he was actually the principal when I first started, or a couple of years into starting at the high school, as when I was a teacher too. So Kevin and I had a strong working relationship. I think there was a lot of trust. We complemented each other well, and it was truly a pleasure to learn from him because he was a wealth of knowledge, a strong leader in our district, and was truly a blessing to have, especially during the pandemic years.
Yeah, being able to understand that journey, there's no denying that there's a marked amount of passion that you have, not only for your job, your career, but your peers, as well as the students. And as a father of four with kids that are in elementary and over at the intermediate school, I look forward to knowing that we have secure leadership in place that's going to take us down this path, which some districts are lacking, or there's consistent turnover and things like that. So I can appreciate the way in which you speak about Davison, knowing that you've really planted some roots here and you want to be here for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I have, people ask me like, well, how'd you end up here or whatever? I never had the aspirations of being a superintendent. Now, some people may look at that like, well, that's, doesn't want the job or whatever. That's not it at all. My number one goal was to have a significant impact in the lives of students. Um, as a
Yep.
coach, you have a unique opportunity to do that in a non-academic setting. And so you can build the relationships with kids um, that are lifelong. And I still see them. I go to the athletic club, and not enough, of course, according to my doctor, but you go there and I see former students and players from 20 years ago. And it's amazing. I mean, even I think Curtis McMahon, our board member, not, I don't think, I know Curtis McMahon was one of my first athletes. And,
Wow.
and Granger Stefanko, he was a student that he was on student council, and I was a student council representative as the teacher representative. And we worked on floats together, things like that. And there's just no greater reward than to be a part of a kid's life and to see them grow over years. And that's what's fun for for my own sake. Now, when I go into school buildings and do building visits, I see these kids that there were kindergartners with my son Camden, and
Hmm.
now they're in ninth grade, and
Right.
I've seen their journeys. And to be able to watch that, like Travis said, at athletic events and music concerts, and just hear about life and what's going on, it's awesome. The opportunity we have in education to not just see our own kids, but to see so many and see the impacts we can have. So
Well, that leads me to my next question. And it's obvious through this conversation and what you've discussed so far, you have such a deep commitment to the Davison community and really putting kids first. As you look ahead, what is your vision for the future of Davison Community Schools and how do you plan to achieve it?
yeah, I think it piggybacks off of the comment I made during the bond that we look tired. I think it's a continued surveying and planning and implementation of strategies and opportunities for our kids to be successful as the world continues to change. And specifically doing things like, we know like DTV is a phenomenal vocational. We have considered a vocational program, a CTE program. Um, that is extremely successful. I mean, we're winning awards at the national level yearly. These kids, what they're going to be able to do with this new studio and that setting for learning, and what Randy, their teacher, um, it's only going to increase the opportunities for these kids as they move on to that greater global community. I want to do that with a whole lot of areas, as many as possible. We're looking at with carpentry. Obviously, we have construction going on all over the place. We want to expand, working with Tom Oddie, our CTE director, the opportunities for those kids by creating lab space, broadening their exposure to the different trades, not just a singular, like it used to be the wood shop, which is fun. It was great to be able to build the bird house and the checkered board, cutting board, and things like that. But to give kids those skills that they can then enter into a trade school or go to college already having had experience with is going to be a tremendous benefit to them. Our health science program. I mean, last year, I think we had, I want to say 7 or 8 students that were going on to the HOSA competition here in January. This year, we're up around 20. Lori Heath and Sarah Sider has grown that program so much. And these kids are now going into the medical field and being assistants and things right out of high school. It's just crazy. So we continue to have our academics and our showing tremendous proficiency and growth on our test scores academically, but it's so much more than that, right? Not every kid is going to go on to a 4-year college. And that's not what we need. We need students to fill roles in our community as part of that economy. And I believe that Davison is going to help rear kids that are going to be more successful and significant at doing that than any other community. And that's really the goal. No matter what these kids, whatever they find their why for coming to school is, or their belonging, whatever their path they think is, and that's where we also come into play, is working with the parents to help provide these opportunities, these paths for kids to look into and dabble with. We want to try to get that as early as possible and then help foster that curiosity, provide them with those skills where they can be the most successful and significant person in that field. And that's what I truly believe Davison Made is all about. Davison Made often is attributed to being with athletics. And for me, it's so much more than that. It's truly excelling at everything we do, from academics to sports to philanthropy to serving to everything. And maybe that's I don't know, a cocky way of looking at it. But like I said at the beginning, I'm a little biased to our community anyway.
Well, that's exactly right, as I think we all are. That's actually an amazing transition into our final question here, where we want to blend the concept of what you have as a vision for Davison Community Schools and what we, as members of the community, business owners, operators, how we can help with the community as well. So, considering the importance of community support in the educational process, as well as the successes, what strategies do you plan to implement to strengthen the relationship between the schools and the wider Davison community and its businesses?
Yeah, so I'm kind of going to piggyback off of one of the first questions too, because I think one of my first initiatives I have to do, or one of my first strategies, I spoke about it at the chamber meeting back in August. When we were in the pandemic, obviously it created a lot of tension and it divided our country in a whole different, many different ways. It really severed those connections between the school and outside of our school, right? Um, to the community. I mean, parents weren't allowed into the buildings. People didn't know what was taking place. Obviously, we had mitigation efforts and all those things that were put on us, and it was just extremely difficult time to say the least. And as we've come out of the pandemic, now we've tried to put into place and open up our doors for those opportunities for parents to come back in. And we've worked on those partnerships and relationships again. And strengthening what we had pre-pandemic is the first priority that I have. Getting people back into our buildings, seeing the great things that are happening, seeing, and then that's the kids, right? It's seeing the great things that kids are learning and doing, and skills and talents that they have, highlighting all of that, elevating the status of our great kids, and then getting back to supporting our teachers and our students with their needs for learning. Um, it's interesting because there was always this talk about the learning loss, and it's there's no question that not being in school or being online, quarantined, and all that's going to have an impact on learning. I'm proud to say that we did our very best to try to provide for face to face as safely as possible for all the families that were able to do that. And it's apparent with our kids that was a strategy that has paid off. Our students are performing well academically. Um, and so now it's continuing to partner or build those relationships back up with our community and attend to the needs that we've had. I think, like Travis said earlier, the work with the chamber. I alluded to having these place-based learning opportunities for our students. Obviously, our business owners and our corporations are going to be a nearby opportunity for those students to work in the community that they live in, and provide them with skills. So continuing to work with the chamber. I'm looking for some of our service organizations to be a part of. I'm already tied into one with outreach. I'm being on their board. That's a recent development. To try to see what are the connections we can make with the school district and our community and keep those strong, so that we hopefully don't feel like we're working in silos. Try to strengthen this where it's the Davison community, not singular organizations, that we're all working in that together. We're not duplicating efforts as much as possible. And again, like I said earlier, that creates communities that are safer, more trusting, and more significant for their community members.
Yeah, and Matt, when you mentioned this partnership, I think it makes me excited because we've had a chance to talk with each other. You've come and spoke at the chamber, and I know you have an open door policy for just figuring out ways that we can partner together. And the chamber's focus this year, and I think it fits really well, is we're focusing on growing community connection. And I think it's right in tune with what you're saying, with how important the schools are in our communities, but then partnering with the important side of the business owners. And I mean, we're all seeing each other around town. We're all seeing each other at sporting events. We're seeing each other at the grocery store. So why not go ahead and start partnering together just to continue to make Davison such a wonderful place to live. So I want to thank you so much for all that you're doing. You have a wonderful team there at the admin building, but then throughout the whole district. It's with kids attending Davison Schools, we've always been very happy. I mean, we always know there's going to be challenges and things to overcome, as kids go through school. But I feel like those have always been, the focus has always been our kids and the staff. And so, I'm really looking forward to continuing to partner with Davison Schools underneath your leadership with the chamber. And just really excited to see what we're going to accomplish together in 2024.
I agree with you, and I appreciate the way you said that. I mean, it's us accomplishing things together. That's going to be that's when it's going to be at its best, right? We don't want communities divided. When there's unity, that's when we do our best work. Yeah. So I appreciate all of you guys. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. And if you ever need me on there again or want me to come back on, I'd be happy to be a guest. So appreciate it.
I love this idea. I think keep the communication going and getting updates out to our community. We feel like the Community Collective podcast is just another avenue just to promote what's going on. We'll definitely reach out to you and get you on here again in the future. And so, Matt Loban, Davison Schools Superintendent, thank you so much for joining us on the Community Collective podcast today.
Well, thank you guys. Have a great day and Happy New Year.